today we are together with.
So before we started recording, we discussed pronunciation and it got all weird. Let's just be honest about it. Miro, as you would say in English, is actually a Spanish name from the artist Miro. And we said so many wrong ways to say it that you got all
I got all
nervous about
doing it wrong.
It's not all about names, though.
No.
So
it's kind of difficult when talking with you, not also mentioning your mother. So I would like to get that out of the way and start there. You have traveled with your mom for a long time, and I first saw you, before I saw you live, in the podcast you did with your mom many, many years ago.
Do you mean TED Talk?
It was a TED Talk. Thank you.
I love you.
I can. We did also have a podcast for many years.
It's the TED Talk because I met your mom on Facebook like everyone else back in maybe 2009. When we were doing our maybe 10, I can't remember, but in the very beginning of the whole craziness, and we connected, and I connected with the idea. I had my kid. I have a daughter your age and a few more that are younger, and I introduced the TED Talk to you. I remember.
Yes,
must be the TED Talk.
But so just to mention it, you of course are the son of wonderful Laini Liberti, who have been a nice voice in bringing out world schooling to the world. But being part of a TED Talk like this, from your perspective, how was that?
Oh, it was nerve-wracking, actually. There was a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that didn't really fully get totally communicated by that video. But I mean, it was great. An amazing experience overall. I was 17 when we did that TED Talk. And it was a little unorthodox because generally you don't have two people up on the stage at the same time. So we kind of were pushing the boundaries a little bit with that one. And it was really funny because we went to, it was a TEDx Ed, like it was specifically an education conference, that one, and it was held in Amsterdam. And it was really odd because we were definitely like the out of the box, like wild card speakers. Everybody else was coming on and talking about, like how to gamify education and like all of these like, like catchphrases that are in the education sphere or like we're entering the education sphere. But approaching it from a very almost like corporate or like conventional like background, like a very like, this is how we can focus on bettering results, and this is about the institution of education and like all of that. And then we kind of showed up and it was like, we don't care about any of that at all. Like that's not why we're doing this. That's not where we come from. So we were definitely coming out of left field on that one. But it was great. It was a great experience.
That's been a little bit weird though.
It is. So when you're preparing for it and you're practicing for it, you're rehearsing. The one thing that they tell you is that, when you're up there, you actually really can't see the people for the lights. And you think that it's just one of those things they tell you to like make you more comfortable. But when you're up there, you actually can't see anything. Like it's just blinding you. And it was a pretty big audience. It was like in between 500 to 1,000 people, I think, there in person. And while we were up on stage, we actually, I don't know if I've ever brought this up publicly, but we actually had to skip on the fly. We had to figure out and skip through chunks of our talk because we were running out of time. And it wasn't for like our fault. It was like the whole event was running late. And so at some point in the middle of our speech, there's somebody, like one of the workers is in front of the stage with like a docket, holding it up and being like tapping it, like, you're out of time. And so on the fly, we have to decide, like, we're like cutting through and zipping around. So there was a couple of like full paragraphs that I didn't get to deliver, that I didn't get to say. And we had to decide on the fly, like what we were skipping. And it was tough because like we have cues, like it was just a whole thing. But the fact that it wasn't a total disaster and that that people wouldn't know that if I had never said anything, I consider that a victory.
And I mean, it has inspired a lot of people. And that's one of the really great things that came out of it, I think. So for people who don't know the story, then they can listen to an episode we also did with your mom. But if you can tell the story from your perspective, also, it would be quite fun to hear.
Sure. And that probably would be a pretty good place to start. So my name is Miró Siegel. Laini Liberti is my mom. Some of you might know her, some of you listeners. And we are originally from Los Angeles. So we're from California. Basically, we kind of fell into this whole world schooling lifestyle accidentally. That's how I always put it. I mean, it was with a lot of intention, but we never meant for it to turn out this way. Like, if you had told us back then that this is how we would be living now, I don't think we would have really known what to do with that information. But basically, my mom, back before we left the States, so my mom was a single parent. She was a very successful woman. She had her own business. It was a branding and design agency back in LA. And she, by extent, was also what I would describe as a severe workaholic, right? So she would probably work upwards of 80 hours every week. I went to a public school right around the corner from where we lived. Very, I guess, like not that conventional, but compared to what we're doing now, pretty conventional.
Yeah.
And so we were miserable. We were totally miserable living our lives, right? Like, I never got to spend any time with her. She was overworked and overstressed, and it was just really hard. And it was really hard to like reconcile, because by all accounts we should have been happy. She was super successful, she was making money, in the US, that's all that matters, right? And so it was like, why are we feeling so unhappy, and why does this feel so empty, right? Eventually there was a breaking point, and that was kind of spurred on by the economic downturn in 2008. When the market entirely crashed. Independent businesses. So my mom, for example, she worked with like nonprofits and stuff. She was the first to go, basically. And so she closed down her business, and something needed to give. Something had to give. And so we ended up one night just in the home office, just kind of sitting around, and she turns to me and she asked me if I wanted to make a change. And she asked me if I wanted to go and have an adventure, because she had this fear that she had wasted and lost so much of her son's childhood, right? And I said yes, of course, right? I was really excited about the idea. I was really excited about the idea of spending time with her, about traveling, about having an adventure, and also about not going to school, right? Because I was also, on the other hand, totally miserable, right? My experience with the public education system was let's just say it was not very fulfilling. And so I was 10. Well, I was 9 when we had that conversation, and by the time we left, I was 10. I didn't school didn't work for me. I was always I was ahead of the class, and I was bored all the time, and then I was penalized constantly for trying to keep myself occupied and trying to like learn more. I would bring in my own books to read after I had finished the assignments, and I was waiting for the others. And I remember I got like yelled at a couple of times for, it's like, you're not paying attention. It's like, whoa.
What?
Anyways.
Yes. I've been there. This is my exact
crazy
experience with public school.
Yeah, it was definitely just not a good experience. Anyways, so yeah, we'd made the decision. I said yes. And then there was a whirlwind, like 6 months of us just packing everything up, of selling everything. We gave up our home, and we had to rehome our dog. Like, it was just everything. And then we were off. Originally, the idea was that we would only be gone for a single year. And we were like, oh, we're going to travel all of Latin America in a year. We're going to go all the way from Mexico, all the way down from Mexico to Argentina. Yes. And it's going to be amazing. And we were like, yeah, let's do it. By the time we were 8 months in, we had made it as far as Guatemala. So we were very clearly not going to make it to Argentina. This was back in 2008, 2009 when we left. So I've been outside of the US for more than half my life at this point. And we still haven't been to Argentina. We've never made it down there.
It will come.
It'll happen at some point.
Or it could be
that or maybe not.
You'll never do.
Yeah. Maybe I'll visit everywhere else and I'll leave Argentina.
It'll be the last country.
Right.
131 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
But it's a fun thing you mentioned, the speed you think you can travel when you haven't traveled full time. I think it comes because it's based of these holidays where you experience Italy in 1 week. No, you're not really experiencing Italy in 1 week. So
go see Paris.
I mean,
that's so true.
We drove our bus to Spain, and the bus has been here 5 years, and now we're finally saying goodbye to it. And we wanted to travel all around Europe, but just
we have traveled all around.
Yeah, but one country is so big, and there's so many things to explore, and so many people and cultures to dive into.
The thing is also, when you stay, some layers will open that will never open I like speed traveling. I think it's fun to go road tripping and move twice a week or maybe even every day. And once we did a 10-day from Istanbul to Copenhagen, we did like 5 capitals of Europe in 10 days, which is crazy. But they were on the way, and we were in a hurry to get back to our hometown for irrelevant reasons. So I can do it, and it's fun, but it's also like eating pure sugar. I mean, there's nothing for real.
Yeah, there's no substance. Yeah.
No, but you can take a picture of the highlights, and but when you stay for a while, that's when you make some friends, and they know things, and they share it with you, and you understand some layers of the culture. You might pick up the language a little bit. I think staying adds a lot of value to the traveling.
Well, definitely. I think it's just one of the general truths about this universe is that things just take time, right? And so, if you don't really allow yourself that space, then those things just might never happen, right? And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make when they first get into like full-time travel. They have this idea of what travel is, and it does come from this vacationer mindset, right? You really do have to adjust. Really, in that first year, I mean, we didn't even travel that quickly, but we still had to unlearn so much. I always say that in that first year of us being out and being traveling full time, that we were still kind of living as tourists, right? And we hadn't yet kind of like left behind that conditioning or that behavior. It just takes time. It just takes time.
But it's fun the first year. I mean, we shouldn't discourage.
It is.
Yeah, it's fun, and it's part of the path. If you think you want to become a world schooler and travel the world, then the first year is the first year, and it has its charm. But I think the hashtag a lot of people use, that we're not on vacation, is very relevant. It for us, it came faster than a year, realizing that we're not on vacation. This is the life. Probably because my mom died within the first 6 months. It was like reality is coming with us here. It's the life that we're living on the road, and how and when we absorb that when we become nomads, that's just an individual journey. Doesn't matter too much.
Absolutely.
I'm sitting on a question, which is, can we, so that was back when you were 10. How old are you now? And What happened in all those years? Sum it up in 1 second.
So what happened in between?
He grew up.
I'm 24.
Yeah.
Now.
Yeah, I told you.
Yeah.
Our daughter is 24.
Yeah.
It's a good age, great age.
It's a good age, yeah.
Then you've been traveling more than half of your life, which is
yes.
But that's just must be wild. What I can be afraid of as a dad, being the one like your mom taking the kids with her than just going, is this will they feel rootless? So now I get a chance to ask you about
he gets out of the what happened question.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
So is there any way where you're like oh, where are my roots at? Or is that a misconception we have about life, that we need to have roots in a certain place?
I think it's a misconception in the sense that there are no guarantees, regardless of what you do in this life. You know, I think that it raises this question of, would I feel fulfilled and would I feel a sense of belonging if I had never left the US, you know, where I was growing up? And the answer is maybe, right? There's really no guarantees. Would I have stayed in touch with the people I would have met in school? Would I have formed like real relationships with them? Maybe. Yeah. Maybe not as well. There's just simply no guarantees, right? And so I think that like playing that game of, well, is this really gonna screw up my kid? You can ask that question about pretty much any single decision you make as a parent. In my own personal experience, I would say maybe sometimes I do feel a little, I wouldn't say rootless, but I feel like I'm seeking a sense of belonging, right? And I don't really know where to find that. I find it in places and I make it for myself whenever I can, but I definitely don't feel that way about the United States at this point, right? Like I don't really ever see myself going back and living there permanently. I feel much more at home here where I live now. I live in Mexico presently. But at the same time, will I live the rest of my life here either? Well, I don't know. Probably not. I'm not really too concerned about it at this point, frankly. And I think that there's a lot of like fussing that goes into being a parent, right? That's practically half of the job is just worrying about how it's going to go, right? And I think that at some point you have to realize like that exists for you. That's not something that like I'm really concerned about. Like I think about the future and I think about my life and I think about there's some worry associated with that, but it's just like that's inevitable. Like that's just, no matter what you do, that's going to be a part of the equation. I'd rather do it in this way, honestly.
Oh yes.
So
I was just thinking, just as you asked the question, that we will within 6 months, I can't do the math on the fly here, but have a child who's been nomadic half of his life.
Yeah.
The youngest.
Yeah.
We left when he was 6.
Yeah.
He will be 12.
He will be 12. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's, I mean, you could call it a milestone. I don't see them as, we ask them. I think that's the easy way to get around the whole worrying thing. Just talk to the kids. They're actually human beings. You just talk to them. So we ask them on a regular basis if they're happy, where they want to go, if they want to go, and if they want to keep traveling or not, and what they need. And as we are a large family, it's sometimes more of a mosaic to make a plan that keeps everyone happy, but it can be done. And I see the root thing. It's interesting. We have by now we've been traveling for 5.5-ish years, and I hear them talk about home several places, and I also hear them talk about belonging. They belong to some part of their story. They belong to the languages they speak. They like the history of our home country that we have dived into after we left, because we meet so many people and they ask us where we're from, and then it's, you know, more interesting to answer the question if you know something. So now they feel, I think, a little more attached to their Danishness because they know the story. But it's about the story. It's about where the Vikings went, and the Vikings were travelers. So we can be travelers in Danish, but not live in Denmark. I find that a part of, so they found a way to grow what would normally be conceived as roots, because we have a house and the school I went to in the park where I played football as a child. They have other things that become their sort of identity anchor.
Well, what's really interesting about that is I think that more than anything, the thing that you learn most about when you travel is about your own culture and about your own nationality, right? And you kind of learn that through like the way that people interact with you and the way that people like see you in other countries. Because when you're inside of it, it's almost impossible to see or to pick apart, you know, what makes it tick. But once you're in another country, there's a degree of separation that gives you a pretty good perspective of what the rest of the world thinks about you and the kind of person that you are and where you're from, right? So I've definitely, it's opened my eyes to a lot of the idiosyncrasies of what it means to be an American, right? And what that means abroad. And, you know, that's also like difficult to reconcile sometimes, especially when there's, you know, there's like complicated history. You know, I've lived most of my life at this point in Latin America, right? There's a pretty complicated history there between our countries. And so that's something that you learn about yourself by being away from where you are considered normal. So I don't know. I think that's really valuable.
You sometimes experience finding yourself in a culture and you learn something about that culture, how things work between people, or the formal society, whatever, the laws about housing, whatever, something new, something, oh, they do it that way here. And then you feel, I'd like to absorb that. I'd like to become that and let go of what was my standard before. Do you feel that still? Yeah, I find that a very interesting element of traveling, that this contrast we meet in a new culture. And sometimes I feel I like this format. I want to be that. I want to try to become that and let go of what I bring with me from, in my case, Scandinavia.
Absolutely. In my case, I think a lot of that happened pretty organically, like without me really even thinking about it. You know, growing up in it, right? Like you're sticky. You just pick things up as you go. That being said, though, there's also been other things where I kind of like actively resist it. I'm like, I actually really don't like this part of, you know, of this way of life. And like, I kind of actively reject it. For example, like I wouldn't say I'm always early, but I'm punctual. I like to show up to places on time. You know, you say, let's meet at 7, I'm there at 7.
And you live in Mexico.
I live in Mexico. So that means that I spend a lot of time waiting for people, because 7 is 7:30.
But that's good to have a Kindle then.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because I put in my earbuds and I listen to a podcast or something, right? But so I mean, there are certain things, right, that it's also good to like actively choose what it is that you like and how it is that you want to be. You don't have to just integrate everything either. I mean, no culture is a monolith, including in the places that you travel to. So I think more importantly, it's the intentional act of of choosing how it is that you want to be, which is the important thing. And travel just gives you a lot of opportunities in that it exposes you to a lot of different options. But that doesn't mean that you have to just wholeheartedly accept everything either.
No, but that wasn't my point either.
No,
I
know.
You still experience that you've been traveling for a big, good chunk of your life. And I was just curious because I started much later in my life compared to you. And I still sometimes I find myself somewhere, I see how they do it. I'm like, okay, yeah, we could do that. But very often I find the opposite. We had some experiences with British culture where they don't sit down at a dinner table. They find the dinner table a little annoying and a little too much. So you just make a bowl and sit whatever at the sofa, have your dinner on the fly, which can be,
but they can't cook,
which can be chill. I get that, but that's not a problem. We have British listeners.
Oh, sorry.
We spent 6 weeks there. It was it was raining every day for one, and it was July and August.
Yeah.
There you have it. No, but I'm just God bless the British. I'm not trying to offend anyone. I was just reflecting back, and I like to sometimes say out loud in my family, should we skip dinner together today? And mostly people would say, yeah, let's just chill. That happens, but it happens twice a month. We like to sit down. We like to have a conversation. We like to have the salt on the table. We like to share even though we spend all day together, we still can share what happened and evaluate, talk about it. That's an example of a cultural element that I wouldn't want to absorb. And I don't see the all-round benefit. I look at it and God bless the British. They can do whatever they want, but I don't want to do that.
No, but
like you don't want to be late.
We just recently arrived before we walked the Camino back in Spain, and one of the things I love here is that people meet outside and they meet and talk, and I love seeing the older generations, all the abuelas, just meeting up at the local plaza, talking, connecting, having fun. Where when I look at the same culture in Denmark, it is very enclosed, and that is one of the things is weather, but it's also culture that you do not mingle in that way. But so I've been very inspired down here about how people get together and meet, but it's also very rarely that you are invited home where we are. And so they meet outside, and that part I will take with me, but I also like the feeling of inviting people into my home, being together with them on this more personal level.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. But that is interesting. I mean, I do think that that's really fascinating, and specifically with Latin culture, right? That is a really important thing. It's this idea, because it's kind of this idea that we've done away with in a lot of Western countries, where we've eliminated public life totally, where it's like there only exists two worlds, the professional and the personal, right? But there is no, there needs to be a third space outside of that, which is just the public, like the social life. And that's something that you see, embodied by the park bench in Latin countries, right? Like you'll actually just be walking through your city or, doing whatever, running errands, and you see people just sitting, just existing, just spending an afternoon out, right? And talking to one another. And that's just something that you don't see in so many places, it's just not something that we're used to. Exactly. And it's a totally acceptable mode of behavior.
It's like the birds in the tree when there's in the morning, you can hear them all sing. It's such a pleasure. I think every time we return to Spain and I walk through a village or a city in the evening when it cools down a little bit, there's this sound of people, the chatting. Yeah. It's the grandmothers, they're talking to each other, the elderly men, they're playing checkers. What's it called? Well, they play games and they play the pétanque and the young people hang out and try to impress each other, and the kids are playing football and the babies are crying and the moms are chatting, and it's just such a nice shared social life that happens in the streets. You don't see it in France, you don't see it in Germany, you don't see it in England, Scandinavia. But when we come south of the Pyrenees, there's this openness, as you say, like a third element.
Yeah.
It's nice.
And I just want to repeat what you said. There are only personal and professional life left. And that is something we need to change.
Yeah.
I like that. I will hang out more after this conversation.
Yeah.
Hang
great.
out.
Hang out, yeah.
Find a park, just hang out with some friends.
Yeah.
About meeting places, then we recently had a podcast interview with Erika Davis Pitre, whom you know also, who is a wonderful unschooling woman and advocate. And when we asked her, so what is the best thing you think that people can do? And she said, well, they should go to one of Laini and Miro's events, because meeting other people doing the same, that is the best thing you can do if you want to walk down this path and see what this life is about.
And we have to convince them to make more events.
Yeah.
That'll be the first step. Yeah.
Yeah.
It
but
is.
I just wanted
it is...
to first talk. Thank you, because I know for us, we met in Granada in 2019 at the event you and your mom did there. And some of the best friends we are still seeing, the people we travel in between, are people we met there. And we are not alone. So this is so big. And I want to be I'm very, very grateful, because I met some of my best friends there. So thank you.
Oh, there's no need to thank me. I'm glad that was your experience. Yeah, I mean, it is really heartwarming, right? Because there is a community now. There is, and it's something that you can actively seek out. It's something that you can interface with. You can tap into it as a resource. Like that wasn't the case for us at all. Like we were in a couple of Facebook groups maybe for like family travel bloggers. I think that was as close as we got to like this flag, right? This kind of like this community that we could really call ourselves a part of. So to see Worldschooling like balloon and really grow has been amazing, because I mean, it probably would have made our journey a lot easier. You know, I think we felt somewhat isolated a lot of the time, and you know, kind of like we had a hard time finding like-minded people, right? That isn't to say that it's necessarily easy now, right? Because it's still kind of a fringe thing being a world schooler, and you know, having these kind of more what people would consider more far out ideas surrounding education and surrounding child rearing and like all that. I don't think it's that crazy. I think it's pretty rational, like why we do the things that we do. And I'm sure you guys would probably agree.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah. But it's definitely much easier to find community and to carve out your own community now than it was 5-10 years ago, right?
I remember when your mom started the first Worldschoolers Facebook group, it was like 200 people.
Yep.
And in the beginning, it was like 25 people.
And then it was 40,000.
You know, people fall over each other. It's crazy. It's great. It's great. There is huge community.
But
definitely.
Can we talk about some of the other stuff you have created together and are working on?
Sure.
Project Worldschool. So how did that idea came to be? And if you just can present what is it about, so people
know. Project Worldschool is, I always explain it to people who don't know, as it's a company that organizes school trips for teenagers who never went to school. So we serve primarily homeschoolers, unschoolers, and worldschoolers, right? But essentially what it is we create like co-created learning communities abroad, so in different countries. Our longer trips are anywhere between 20 and like 30 days. And then we have intro trips for younger tweens who are maybe not like ready to just take the plunge. And those are about 10 days long. But we've been running this company for over 10 years now. And it started off originally, like we created it with totally selfish intentions, right? We had been traveling. I was 13 or 14 at the time. We'd been traveling by that point for a couple of years. Going into my adolescence and my teenage years, I was starting to feel that kind of pressure of like, how do I reconcile the fact that my teenage life is not going to look like the way I've been told it's going to look like, like just not necessarily by like people in my life, but by media, by, just the general cultural understanding of what it is to be a teenager. My life didn't look like that. And so I was really struggling with that and really thinking about that a lot. And I remember having a conversation with my mom at one point where we went over options and we were talking. She was like, look, I see it one of two ways. One option is that we give up our globe-trotting, traveling lifestyle and we go back to the States. I can get a job. You can go to school. You can be around people your age. And at that point, I kind of rejected that because I already understood that it was too late for me. I had seen too much. And
oh yes.
And but I understood. Like I was like, look, if I go back now, is there really a guarantee that I'm going to actually connect with any of these people, or I'm going to meet somebody, or am I going to get there and feel trapped and that I've made a huge mistake, right? And I just knew it in my core. I was like, yeah, I don't want to go back to that. I really am not interested. And then she said, in the other options, we just continue traveling, but we attempt to make community wherever we go. And then we talked about that a lot and what that might look like, and what that community, like who is going to make up that community, right? Like which kind of people did I feel a sense of belonging? And so it was like this like really long conversation, just like figuring things out. And then eventually Project Worldschool was kind of born out of that conversation. We ran a prototype trip with a couple of people we had met at an unschooling conference sometime before. And it was very different from, we ended up making the structure and our making it work as we went. But that prototype trip was really the first thing. We had some teenagers come down for 6 weeks and come and stay with us where we lived in Cusco in Peru. And it all kind of just started there. So yeah, we've been running it ever since. And like I said, yeah, it just started out of this need for our own family. But we also understood that there's probably a lot of, other people within our community that felt that same need, and that there really wasn't there weren't a lot of projects that were out there that were serving the teenagers of, the homeschooling, unschooling, world schooling community. At least at that point, there really weren't any. There was like Unschool Adventures. There was like one other company. And then that was like kind of it. Right. So we started it, and lo and behold, yeah, people responded to it really well. And we've been running it for 10 plus years, a lot of life-changing trips. A lot of our participants have never been out of their country before coming on one of these trips. So it's their first time, their first taste of the world, doing it in partnership and community with their peers, which they don't always get to do in person. Right. Yeah, just like really amazing. And now at this point, for me, it's less, it serves less of my own personal needs, right? Because, I've outgrown a lot of it, and I've kind of pursued and expanded, and I've, figured out my life outside of the alternative education sphere to an extent. But it does still feel great to support others in their development and in their needs. So it's definitely shifted from like a kind of like a selfish, like this serves me, to now I'm serving, others.
But you must also have seen so many life change for young people when you're helping them, giving them
Absolutely.
This opportunity. I mean, that must just feel overwhelming and great when you tie it up afterwards. It must be like, wow.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. Totally. I mean, the participants don't want the trip to end. you know, by the time it rolls around, everybody's crying at the airport when we have to send them off, you know?
Yeah.
So it's something real. It's something special. So we of course during the pandemic we had to put a pin in it. We went on hiatus. Obviously travel was like the first thing to kind of shut down. But now we're really getting back into the swing of things. Next month actually is our first full-length retreat back. So we've run intro trips since the pandemic, and then next month we're going to Thailand with a group of unschooled teenagers. So really stoked about that.
Yeah, I saw it. Looks great. Back in the game.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, I mean that's Project Worldschool. I've also worked on quite a few other projects, I guess. I think one of the all right, so kind of backtracking a little bit. I think oftentimes in these conversations, the role that I kind of step into is one of a case study, right? Where there's always this question amongst parents where it's like, how is my kid going to turn out? Are they going to be functional? Are they going to be okay? You know, and I think that a lot of parents
like you.
Well, I think I'm okay, you know.
Totally. No. I'm just saying, you know, there might be variants.
Oh, of course. But I think a lot of parents are kind of like probing with that in mind when they ask me questions, right? And one large part of that is like, are you going to get a job? Like, how are you going to survive? Are you going to be self-sufficient? You know, all of these things, right? So I'm also comfortable talking about that side of my upbringing as well. I mean, Project Worldschool did support us from like my teenage years on for quite some time. And so it's like working kind of like with a family business. But then after that, I also kind of branched off and I started doing a lot of online facilitation. I started teaching classes online. I started to I got in with this other company that is really amazing. They're called The Hub. And they launched, I think in 2020. So right after the real heat of the pandemic started, and that was online facilitation for autodidactic and self-directed learners, and for self-directed children, basically from like between the ages of 9 and 13. So I did a lot of work with them. I worked with them for a few years. I basically helped them totally set up and structure their online programs. So I think that you have this concern as a parent that this unique upbringing maybe in some ways limits what possibilities your kid will have access to. But at the same time, you can flip that on its head and you can say, there are also things, very specific and very unique things that nobody else can do, right? And I felt like I was so prepared for this job going into it because it was what I had been living. It was, you know, I remember my job application, I was like, look, really, I have no formal accreditation. I have no formal education when it comes to this. I don't think that matters. Here's who I am. This is my life experience. This is why I think I'm perfect for the job. And lo and behold, I was one of the first picks for this position. So I think that more than anything, it's just about your own application, I guess, of your lived experience. And yes, I am limited in that I probably will have a harder time going into and having a corporate life, and, you know, or maybe even getting into academia or something like that. But I see that as a blessing because I don't really want that life for myself.
No, and I couldn't, as you said before, you had seen too much of the world.
It's too late.
It's too
I've
late.
Seen too much. That isn't to say that like I'd be totally barred. Like I think I could if I really wanted to get into academia, you know, and I applied myself, and I'm sure I can make it happen. It's just that I guess if anything, the limitations at this point are intrinsic. The limitations come from me, right? I don't want that, so I'm not going to do it.
No, and I think one of the limitation when I look at going back, sometimes if I have a very dark period where we have a lot of choices ahead of us, I can, in a very, very dark moment, think, oh, it would be so easy if somebody else decided over my life. I could go back to the 9 to 5 and I had structure and I didn't have the responsibility, you know.
Sure.
But then it pops away very, very fast because the idea of working this classical 9 to 5 again after being out of it for so long, besides me dreading it, I'm almost afraid of needing to be in a place for so many hours, so many times. I can hear
the fear in your voice.
But yeah, I cannot think about it. But when I try to think about it, what I find really weird is it is not the way I work best when I work.
Right.
And that's what I find really, really strange. And I would have difficulties going back to a 9 to 5 because if it was up to me, I would maybe chill for 3 or 4 days, and then I would work 12 hours in a day, just totally immersed, totally focused on what I really love to do.
Because you've done the incubation.
Yeah, I've done the incubation. I've walked around. I've gotten the ideas and stuff like that. I cannot see a normal 9 to 5 office work. There's a lot of jobs where you need to be there. It's not like I can serve all the clients in a restaurant on Friday afternoon.
Right.
But for normal office work like I did, the idea, the structure, it just messes with me. I cannot see that it's clever. I cannot see that it works for people because I am not productive when I'm in that state. And
what you just described also applies to in-person schooling, right? In a lot of ways, right? It's this, you get stuck with this, you get stuck focused on results. It's like a results-based problem where how do you measure that, right? Like you just said, like you need to incubate. Learning, there's an incubation period of like, okay, I need to be passive. I need to let things kind of cook. I need to, and then boom, the learning happens when you're ready, and it happens like that. No resistance with, it's the exact same dynamic. But if you're constantly prodding and pushing and putting pressure on this thing, because you have a quota, you need to do this much learning by this, it's just a little absurd, but not too much. You can't
make a head in the book.
No. But yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It just comes down to a question of agency, I think. And if you deprive a person of agency, things are inevitably in one way or another just going to stop working, right?
But that's what we see with most people. Basically, we take the agency out by schooling. That's what I see the major impact school has on children, that when they are 15, they don't know what they want, and they don't know what to do, and they don't know how to find out. So they just probably are going to take another education because that will figure it out for them, and then maybe one more, and then they can get a job, and then there will be a boss to tell them what to do, and that would be so nice and structured. And then suddenly you're 65, and if you're lucky, you get a heart attack. It's a long journey of conditioning people into not feeling, not knowing, and not being able to make a decision as to what do I really want, and maybe do it wrong. Get up in the morning. What I really want to do today is eggs. Do eggs all day. Go to bed at night. Feel extremely frustrated and annoyed. Get up the next morning and think, maybe it's not eggs. Maybe it's something else. And I think a lot of childhood is also about that, about learning to explore what life can be. And the teenage years, it becomes maybe a little more, focused, while it also is very unfocused. but it becomes very philosophical. My kids and my personal life was very much about thinking in those years about what life is and feeling. And but if we shovel all that away and put a school system instead, then we deprive the young people of arriving at young adulthood with the method of finding out what makes me happy and how do I make my life work. Sure. And that, I think, is the most sad outcome of schooling, really. It's really bad. I really feel sorry for the teens coming out there and just not knowing who they are, not knowing what they want, not having any direction that is their own.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, look, the not knowing is okay, but you should do that as early as possible. That's what childhood is for.
Frequently, actually, ask yourself again, do I really know?
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, exploration, trial and error, making mistakes, screwing up. These are things you should do when you're a child, when you have a support system in place, like your family's going to be taking care of you no matter what. Might as well start making mistakes now rather than later, right? When you don't, exactly. It's the best time to make mistakes. And
maybe waste some time as well.
Yeah.
Look at the horizon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's just this results-based thinking. It just kind of kills us. Yes. And we are obviously conditioned to think that way for a number of different reasons. There's material reasons, there's cultural reasons.
There's fear.
And there's fear, yeah, and that comes from ideas surrounding scarcity, ideas surrounding, accomplishment and, who you are, your identity.
And also it's
okay to screw up. You should.
Old cultural realities. I mean, it's not real anymore that you have to go to school to learn to read and write. That used to be real. 150 years ago, it was probably real. No one could read around you. You had to go to the school. There were no books in your home. Sure. There were only the priest could read, and he only a language you didn't understand. So, I mean, the reality has changed, but the school system has not changed. And I think this discrepancy makes even more darkness, more trouble in the world. I'm distracted by my own thoughts right now because I want to trot back a lot. Okay. Something you said when I was distracted before. I'm sorry, maybe just too little and too much going on at the same time. I think you said something very important about being a case study when people talk to you. I think it's true that the older unschoolers, the older worldschoolers, the older teens and the young adults, they become like I don't know if you say that in English. In Danish, we say they are the giraffe. Everybody's staring at them. You go to the zoo to see the giraffe.
Right.
So you're the case study. Everybody's looking at you, and it does help to look at you and the other wonderful young people who come out of this culture. I was just thinking, do you have any ideas how we could, as a community, make this information available for the beginners, that the young people are so wonderful, without all of you guys feeling like the giraffe or the case study?
Or the prize pig, it's people called in
English. The prize pig in English. Okay, I didn't know that. I have some at hand now. My kids are coming to that age now, and until now we haven't really put them out there. It's us doing the podcast, not our children, but they are really, I mean, they are the ones being stared at now. I'm just thinking, how can we make that a comfortable experience for the young people, older teens, young adults, because it's very relevant and important information to just stare at you
and see that you're kind of
really, and your colleagues, the ones who got through, and you can see they didn't turn square or green or weird. I think I did ask the question by now.
I think, I mean, I can't speak for others, right? And I don't know what other grown unschoolers or world schoolers, where their comfort lies in being public and in being seen. I've always been very okay with having these conversations and yeah, kind of existing in this public way. I guess the main thing is, I don't know really what we can do. You know what I mean? Like we can have our conversations. The main thing that I think needs to change, or the main thing that is most important is, or they're the ideas that the parents hold in the first place, right? And I think that I can speak from experience, and I can share, what I think and everything. But sometimes the reality is that it's the parents that need to unlearn certain behaviors, or learn certain behaviors, or drop certain needs, and not their children, right? I'm not speaking for the benefit of other unschoolers out there. I'm speaking for the benefit of the parents, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what that is. And so I don't know. I don't really know how to answer that question. I'm personally happy to do it, but
question.
It's hard. I do think that just I'm much more willing to speak with somebody and to really get into it with somebody that I can tell is willing to change, and then that they realize that they are a part of the conversation, a really important part of the conversation. We're not talking about their children necessarily. We're talking about what they think about their children, and what they think their children's needs are, and what, so I think that cutting that abstraction and cutting that separation a little bit really helps me get into it with them and talk frankly and openly about what I think is like the real issue. Yeah. So I don't know, I guess being vulnerable, leveling and saying, look, I'm a parent. I have a couple of kids who are about to be teenagers, and instead of framing it in a way where it's like, they're not doing this, they're not enough, they're not where they need to be, you say, I'm afraid that they're not enough. I'm afraid about, because it's not about them, it's about you. So I don't know. So I think
people are willing to do that if they are being open-minded. It's okay to stare a little bit.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's totally understandable, but the only times I get annoyed is when I start hearing people say they're putting everything on the kid, and I look at them and I just want to say, I don't think that's the problem here.
No.
I just don't think that that's the case. Your kid's fine. Your kid, look, you think I'm all right? You think I'm this example that you want your children to be like. When I was your kid's age, I was probably just spending weeks at a time in front of my computer and just playing Minecraft and just killing time. And, I didn't have much motivation, much interest in doing anything else. And that was incubation. That was a lot of time of like processing and working through things and letting things run their course. And then they did. And I went and did other things, and I grew and I learned and I got older, and, that's how life is done. Right. So it's like, when I hear that, I also, I guess, sometimes I don't really feel this way that strongly, but I guess when I hear parents talk about that as if it were like such a negative thing, I do hear a little bit of judgment, right? And I'm like, well, what's wrong with that? Because that was a part of my experience, and I think that, it's just this short-sighted view of parenting that it does kind of get under my skin a little bit sometimes. It's like, just be okay with it. They'll be fine. I don't know, be there to support them when they need to change, and that's it. But
and also, as we have just spent some days with my parents, they came and visited us. It was lovely. But when I look at how it must have been being them with a son like me, I would have had times where I was afraid of whatever would happen with me. I mean, I was a wonderful screw up in between I was 20 and until I met Cecilia. And now I'm living the life many people dream about. But you couldn't see that when I was 23. You absolutely couldn't, man.
No.
Oh, no, no. I had a lot of fun when I was young.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. No, I absolutely think it's about the fear. To put you on now you are in the spot of being this guy we are looking at. So what are your interests these days? What do you really love doing?
Do a lot of things. It's always really changing. I am a pretty avid rock climber. I have all my gear and my equipment right there, actually. So that's been something I've been really exploring in these last 2 years. I've been climbing for 7 years, but really getting into it last 2 years. So I've been doing a lot of lead climbing and kind of pushing myself, and that's been really fulfilling. There's a natural crag out here up in the mountains that it's in walking distance. So I just walk up into the mountains with some friends and do some rock climbing. And I don't know what that might turn into. I have a friend who I started climbing with, actually. We got into it at the same time. He's now a guide, a rock climbing guide. So he just went through and he did all of the certification and everything. We're planning on maybe at some point launching some kind of business there that marries travel with rock climbing and getting people out to all these really great locations. So,
but it could also not become anything, just rock climbing.
Yeah. Well, I'm not doing it because I think it'll be a job at some point. I'm doing it because I love it, because I think it's amazing.
But I have I mean, I have what I call a natural respect for heights. Other people would call it
fear of heights.
Fear of heights.
Term,
yeah. But isn't it terrifying when you are up there? And I mean, is it what interests you about this? Because for me, it just sounds crazy. I mean, I don't understand.
It's not really the heights that gets you, it's the falling.
Yeah. That's right.
So just don't fall, I guess, is what they say. No, I've fallen, on lead. You take what they call whippers. So you fall, and you could fall maybe up to 3-4 meters, sometimes more. It's fine. You get used to it.
But I'm just trying to understand what's the cool thing about it, because for me it would be hell.
It's accomplishment. It is such a fulfilling sensation. Rock climbing is so holistic in that you work everything physically, but also mentally and emotionally, because a huge part of the game is staying calm and not entering into, an adrenaline rush state or the fear. So it's about regulating yourself. It's about overcoming. It's about pushing your limits. Like any sport, it's about expansion and growth, but rock climbing really it does it in such a tangible, visible way, because suddenly, you're 50 meters up and you're at the anchor and you just did that climb that you never thought you'd be able to do, and you're looking out and the view's great from up there. So it just feels amazing. It's a lot of fun.
Yoga gives me that, and that's on ground.
I can't do yoga. Yoga's not my thing. I've tried. So that's one of the things I'm into these days. I do that a lot. I also am really into nowadays. I'm really into digital design, just something that I've just started teaching myself just for fun. I'm teaching myself Photoshop, and I've been doing that for about 6 months, but I've taken to it pretty quickly. And I'm actually going to be teaching a Photoshop class for young adults and for tweens coming this next spring. So not necessarily a class, but kind of just like a group to get together and just talk about trade techniques. We'll do challenges. We'll play games. There's plenty of things that we can do using that as a tool. But just kind of teaching design ideas. So that's something that I've been learning a lot. I'm really into music. I'm really into I'm learning the bass, actually. I'm really into politics and economics. I'm really into history. I love history, history and mythology. Like there's so many things that, you know, capture my interest, and things that I've learned that I am into over the years, things that I've been exposed to, and I things that I've only learned that I'm so into them because I was given the freedom to pursue them, you know, and there have been plenty of things that have been passing interests that I've dipped my toes in, and I've said, hey, I think this is kind of cool. And then I've tried to get into it, and it just doesn't stick, and it goes. And that's okay too. Like yoga, right? Or like I used to be really into like botany and like mycology. I used to be really into yeah, I don't know. Like
no, it makes sense.
certain things. But not all of it's going to stick, but some of the things do. And those are the things that I still am very much interested in and engaged with.
Yeah, and that's one of the things we try to explain when we talk with people about what is one of the biggest values about living life this way, and it is time. Yeah. Time that you yourself decide over, that you can do whatever you want with, and just go deep into a rabbit hole if you want to do that.
I think also philosophically, it's for me, the unschooling, the choice to unschool the children had a lot to do with ethics, that realizing that these maybe 10,000 hours they would have been in school are not my hours or the school's hours or the state's hours or the hours of the curriculum. It's hours of my child's life that I have no right to decide over.
I have a question, but first a little something, which is we call our podcast self-directed. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to have more about living a self-directed life. But then every time we choose guests, I return to, we need to help set the children free first. There's no reason putting you into a school system and then teach you how to live a self-directed life. So the more people we can help not to go down that road, I believe more people will come out in the other end and taking responsibility of their own life. It's something that is very important for me when I talk with people. I hate it when people blame other stuff for what's happening in their life. I think your life is yours to live, and you need to be responsible for your own life. And then to the question, which is, for you who have lived the life you have lived, if you should give an advice to young people who are listening and to their parents, so it's two advices, one for each group. What would you say to a young person who wants to change their life or go in some direction and figure out what they're going to do? And sorry to put that amount of burden on you.
That's all right. I think my answer to both groups would be centered around patience. I think that oftentimes, we have these ideas about what should be happening in our lives. We have these ideas about like what we should be doing, where we should be, how we should be doing it. And all of these hypotheticals, like all of the, these would-be's, they only exist in your own head. They exist mentally, and stressing over it and like agonizing over those shoulds is probably one of the worst things in the world, is to feel pain for something that isn't real. Right. And I think that parents do this when they think about where their kids should be. And I think that people themselves do it when they think about their own lives. Right. Just time reveals everything. It's at its own pace. It might be really frustrating. I'm a very impatient person. I struggle with it a lot. But I think that that's just kind of a natural part of, of adulthood, of just being a person, right? I think I think leaning into, and also to some extent, I agree with you that yes, we all have responsibility for the way our own lives go, but also I think that we need to stop demonizing or like putting down the value of surrender, right, and of acceptance, and I think that that helps me so often, where it's like, okay, well, that didn't go the way that I thought it would. That's it. Just surrender to that. That's something bigger than me. It happened. What next, right? Instead of constantly fighting with circumstance, you know, the things that you can change them. The things that you can't change, move on. So I don't know. I think being okay with surrender to a degree is helpful. It's really helpful.
Could also be part of, now your question was about if you want to change your life, but how about appreciating? I mean, like you say, have patience and surrender to what is also about appreciate what is, be grateful for what is, and
it's true.
You know, enjoy the moment. We usually talk about in our family how most pain comes from the gap between how you want reality to be and how you perceive it to be.
Yes.
That gap is quite easy to close. You can either change your perception a little bit or change the way you want it to be a little bit, and then there is no pain.
Absolutely. I mean, your life is what you pay attention to. Right? And it sounds really simple. It sounds kind of
really
obvious,
simple.
and it is, but it's true. Like that is everything, right?
It's all in the mind.
The opportunities, the things that appear, the people that you meet, it's only possible when it's possible. It's only possible when you're in a state to accept it, to pay attention to those things, to observe them. And you know, when you're not, well, it's not for you, not in that moment.
It leads me to talk a little about fate, because I feel we are in a period where we have moved away as cultures from fate, and it was also systematized in a way, and I mean, I'm not very much down with the Danish church. I've been to some of them and they're quite boring. But we have some American friends where we were sitting together with them eating, and they were giving grace before the dinner. And that was like, wow. And I've thought a lot about that, to actually just sit for a moment before you eat and be grateful that there is food, and actually saying it out loud. And to just, I know I need to practice being grateful still. When I look at our life today, we have location independent income, we can travel the world, and our life is pretty amazing. But still there's stuff I want to achieve and stuff. And sometimes I forget all the cool things. If I look back at where I was 8 years ago, sitting in an office, being tired of going to an everyday work, this life I have now is what I dreamt about. And so we are in a fun place where it's okay to get new dreams. It's actually okay to be in a place where you are living a life and say, I'm very grateful, but I still want something to aspire to, something to move towards. But this working with gratefulness is really a thing that and that was why I mentioned fate, that I think that people have come to kind of not do. We don't take the talks about what we're grateful about, because it has been taken over by the church at some point.
Or even, I would argue, even taken over by capital. That seems to make more sense to me. It's easier to sell people things if they're not grateful for what they already have. Because if you're grateful, you probably think you have enough. So, I mean, there are other conditions too, which I think play a part in that. And I think modern life definitely has become material, right? In so many ways, right? Like fate itself, right? If we're talking about predestination, that conversation used to be a purely religious one. Whereas now I would argue that to some degree, our lives are predetermined in a sense because we were born in a certain place of time and as a part of a historical trend, and there are material conditions that our families were subject to that have nothing to do with us, that predate us. So like in those ways, like those are factors that will, you know, kind of limit or change the scope of like where you can go. You can still move within that, but you know, there are these elements. So I don't know. I think we live in a really fascinating time. And I think that's also why we need agency now more than ever, why we need, you know, like to instill a sense of you know, personal autonomy and growth in our children. Like they're going to need it more than anybody else did, because this, you know, yes, growing up to be the best cog in the system that you can be, it's a survival mechanism for a lot of people, and many generations did it because it worked, because it meant that they got along and they were provided for. But what happens when that machine breaks down and it's not there for us anymore? We have to exist outside of it. You know, that same luxury, that same life path just simply doesn't exist for people of my generation and for the generations below me. So yeah, I think it is really important. You need to be a free thinker because, you know, and be autonomous and have a sense of personal agency and ideals and ethics and goals and dreams, because, well, the other path that's been laid out, it's just I wouldn't put too much faith in it. Personally, but
no, me neither.
We love to talk, Miro, and we love to talk for a long time. And I think it has been really great having this dialogue with you. I would love for you to tell a little more about where people can find you and connect with you and what you offer to the world.
Sure, absolutely. I think the first place would be if you have a teen and, you know, you want them to experience more of the world, you want them to have social interaction. Look, Project Worldschool, that's where you're going to find your peers. You can find that over at projectworldschool.com. I've also got, like I mentioned, I have another project launching this next spring, and that is specifically for like artistic unschoolers or homeschoolers, self-directed learners between the ages of, you know, let's say 12 and, you know, 12 and up. And that can be found over at artist@heart.community. And that's, in the show notes. We'll put that. Yeah. All right. Fantastic. Yeah. Well, I'm really excited about that project. We're just launching it in spring. It's me and a couple of other facilitators, and there's going to be workshop style, like classes and discussions and all kinds of stuff online surrounding different things. We've got music learning. So we have guitar lessons for unschoolers. There's going to be Photoshop classes. That's the one I'm going to be teaching. There's also going to be, you know, just general visual arts, creative writing, just all that kind of stuff. So
great.
Yeah, that's really exciting. So you can check us out over there, and then just find me on social media. You know, again, like I said, I'm a case study. I'm willing to talk to people, and I'm happy to, you know, to bridge that gap as well. So you can find me at, you know, Miró Siegel. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm very public. If you look for me, you'll probably find me.
Perfect.
Thank you for your time.
It was wonderful.
Of course. Thanks for the conversation.